everyone. So tonight I am going live with Sara Higdon. She is a trans woman, and as you know, I have been talking about kind of all the things trans this week, from covering Blair White and the Morgan Ariel video to even some stuff to do with what's his name, Andrew Tate, all the controversy there, and Candace Owens, Daily Wire, and that chocolate bar. So. How are you doing?
I am good. I'm good. Thank you for having me. My favorite big booty Armenian, right?
Yeah, we excited. I'm fine.
I had to. If Alex Stein doesn't claim it, I mean, you're mine, so it's fine.
I know. Literally, he did. He gave me the retweet yesterday and said that he support or he what did he say? He was like, I
Oh, he said
fully
he endorses you. Yeah.
yes, he endorsed it. He didn't give me the title as we talked about, but I did get the endorsement. So I need to do like a little video there because that was pretty cool. So I wanted to see what you thought. Well, first of all, actually, I was over on your Twitter feed and I saw that it is actually Detransitioner Day. Is that correct? Can you tell us like a little bit about that? Is this something that
Yeah. I think it's
year?
the second annual. So
Second.
it's Detransition Awareness Day. And detransitioners are people that once transitioned and now have gone back to living as their biological sex. And so a lot of them are coming out more and more as trans has been pushed more and more and become more trendy. You're seeing now the people starting to come out that were kind of tricked into this ideology and now regret that decision. So they're going back to living, as they were, as best as they can. But they're speaking out about it so it doesn't happen to other people so other kids aren't going through the same thing as them. So that there's more awareness actually around it, and people can be more educated with the decisions that they make.
Yeah, and I think you shared something with Chloe Cole, which I don't know exactly how old she is, but I've seen her and kind of followed her on Twitter. I hadn't seen her
Hmm.
for much lately, but she's a
Yeah.
pretty woman, right? She kind of partially transitioned like pretty early. Is that correct? And then
So yeah, Chloe's actually a friend of mine, and we're doing an event in Westchester, Pennsylvania this coming weekend together,
awesome.
with No Left Turn Education. And so she, so she, her story starts when she was 13. She was placed on the puberty blockers at the age of 13, then they put her on testosterone at 13. She had a double mastectomy at 15.
Oh wow.
And then ended up detransitioning at 16, and she's 18 years old right now. So
Oh wow. Yeah.
yeah, and she's been speaking out for the last year. I mean, she's been pretty popular for a little while now. She's been speaking out, testifying for bills to prevent this from happening and everything like that. She's an amazing young woman, and yeah, her story is really interesting because it shows that there's a lot of factors that are being ignored in the transition of kids. One of her cases is being on the spectrum. Other people, their anxiety and their depression is just being lumped in and saying, hey, you're probably just gender dysphoric. There's another detransitioner that I know of who basically had a very rough childhood and came out, and I mean, they literally had, um, self-harming scars, like cutting scars and stuff all over their body. And basically, when they said, "Oh, you should transition," it was basically the doctors became basically indulged in her self-harm
Yeah.
rituals.
That's crazy. Yeah, I watched a video from Blair White today because I've been kind of actually since you tweeted something about it was like a retweet of Blair White. I didn't really it was like saying, oh, I'm trans, like I'll never have a period or something like that. And I was like, I'd seen Blair White like all over on,
Hmm.
Instagram, and I'm like, she's very beautiful. I thought she was just a very beautiful conservative commentator. Like I'd seen her kind of like pop up on Twitter, but
Hmm.
I guess I had never really looked at her content because she obviously talks about being transgendered all the time. But I didn't notice it. And so I was like, what? So I started like getting into her content to be like, what's the story here? Um, but I watched a video of hers today where she talked about, um, she was with Buck Angel actually, who Buck Angel's another one where I was like, is this a parody? Because he looks so much like a man that when I saw his profile pop up multiple times, I'm like, no, surely that's a man. And I'm just confused. Like, because there are so many accounts on Twitter where you're like, is
Hmm.
what it says it is, or is this a parody? Like, because
Yeah.
like visually and everything looks, he looks just like a man. And so anyways, they were talking about back when, like, because Buck is a lot older. Buck is like 60. In his day, you had to do all kinds of mental health evaluations and everything like that to even qualify to undergo any type of gender reassignment or gender surgery, transitioning, with hormones, any of that. Now, Blair is younger and had only transitioned about 7 years ago. And she was saying that for her, she just went into the doctor's office, basically walked out with estrogen. So it was like, obviously for her that worked out fine, but they were just talking,
Hmm.
and like the context change and everything. What do you know much about? I mean, I'm sure you know a lot about that. Like, what insight can you kind of give us into like the evolution and where you think they're at now, and if it's going to get better or worse, or
Yeah. Yeah. Well, so Buck was one of the first basically trans men, period. Like he was one of the first people, I guess his doctor ever treated. And so he was kind of an experiment in the early 90s when he was transitioning. Now, one thing about Buck Angel is if you go Google him, just turn your settings on because Buck Angel is a pretty famous porn star. Um,
that. Okay, see a new.
yeah. And that's, I mean, his business now, he does some cannabis stuff and he does like sex toys and things. So, but he's also in this fight to help protect children. We all kind of run in the same circles. We all know each other, and so his stuff was really interesting. But you're right, he did. He says he had to go through all these mental health evaluations and everything like that to make sure it was the right thing to do. I was the same as Blair White, where when but see, I sought out a clinic that was an informed consent clinic.
Oh,
I did all my own online research. I made sure that everything was right for me. I didn't really worry as much because, again, I was about 30 years old when I started transitioning, so I was a
oh wow,
fully functioning adult. There
yeah,
was no issues. Um, and that's where I kind of even still stand is if you're an adult, you have self agency over your body. You should be able to choose what you want to do. It's up to you to make sure that you have all the information before you transition.
yeah.
One of the issues is that they started doing these types of things, and then they were never giving a lot of the side effects. So a lot of the detransitioners that we're talking about now were adults when they transitioned and there weren't a lot of detransitioners at the time speaking out against it. So there really was no like anybody speaking out like these are the side effects that I've had. It was all just like you can call it love bombing online, where everybody that was talking about it was having these amazing results and it was what was right for them. And so they were able to be kind of manipulated in that way into making it seem like this is the right thing to do. Um, so it kind of the evolution to getting to where you can make those informed decisions is where we're starting to get to now because we have these full effects that this isn't just this magic cure that they were selling to a lot of people for quite a while, and that's why a lot of them are speaking out. That's why I speak out. I speak as a trans person with them, and try to fight on their side because they get a lot more hate because they left the cult. But yeah, they say that children are getting these evaluations and everything like that, but all the whistleblowers and stuff that are coming out
Mm,
are really kind of painting this picture that it's kind of a check the block type thing where like even these clinics, it's like if you go in, you want to get this stuff, like these children are being put on them if they want to. And if they go to a therapist that's not affirming, that doesn't, say that they should get it, then the actual gender clinics will tell them a therapist that will write them a letter type thing. And so they have like these working relationships where it's not actually safeguarding. They're literally just trying to push this onto children,
Yeah.
without question.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's so interesting because so much of health care is like that now. And I actually practiced medicine for 6 years, but if I go backwards to when I was like 21, there was a time when I was like overworked. I had two jobs. I was taking classes like prereqs for school, and I was like so exhausted. I was like having trouble learning organic chemistry. Like, who doesn't have trouble learning organic chemistry? So I remember going to the doctor and, do I have ADD? And they did exactly that. They put out like they had like a checklist, and they said, check which ones you have. And then they did like a little addition, and they said, you do have ADD. And they gave me a medication for that. That once I took it, I was like instantly hooked, and I was,
Yeah,
is not, I probably only took it for about 2 months because I recognized right away. I was like, I crave this. I want it. I want more. Like, this feels like it solves all my problems. And that was the first experience I had with like a medication where I was like, this could be really dangerous. And some of these
hmm
psychological drugs could be very dangerous. And then the fact that, like you said, they only give you a checklist for that
well,
is a little bit,
and and even in that regard, I mean, isn't Adderall basically essentially the same thing as like cocaine?
yeah, like
Like that's what I've, yeah.
this was like the stronger version of it then even stronger than Adderall. So it was like
hmm
definitely like changed your line of thinking and everything. But that is what they do, and that is how they practice
Yeah,
now. They never asked me like, hey, are you just really tired? Are you just overworked or anything like that? So I do think that that's kind of interesting. Another thing that I've experienced personally is like, obviously, I mean, as an adult, I got breast implants and I'm fine with that and I'm happy with it. And so that's where I would never like shade anyone about whatever surgeries or procedures they want to get or anything like that. But that alone is something that other women have come out and said they've had so many issues with, now
yep,
implant illness, and all kind of, I mean, even at the time, I knew people who had bad results, had to get multiple surgeries, things like that. But the breast implant illness was a new thing. So that is again like one of those procedures that they're doing on adults mostly and stuff, but it comes out like there can be side effects, there can be issues, and
yeah,
medical community doesn't always sell you that up front. They make it sound like this is tried, this is true, this is good, you're going to be fine. So you think that there's a little bit of that, you know,
absolutely.
kind of,
Yeah, I think that's a huge thing, especially in like I mean you mentioned it, like the plastic surgery realm is full of that. I've actually talked to Adrienne Curry, who is a big advocate against any types of plastic surgery because she had issues with her implants, and I've seen other people with that. And the thing is like the stats are not like they don't talk about those things. It's like most people I think like breast implants are a routine procedure, and they're really not. They do come. There are a lot of people that have a lot of complications. There's just a lot more people that are happy with their decisions. And it is interesting because with trans surgeries, depending on what the surgery is, you do have to get therapist letters to be able to have surgery.
mhm,
And so, like when I had bottom surgery and I had to get two therapist letters, and one of those therapists had to be a PhD. But
mm,
even still, well, as a libertarian, I was like, this is ridiculous. I'm an adult. I should be able to do what I want. I mean, I'm like, I'm 33 years old. I shouldn't have to worry about this. At 34 years old, I shouldn't have to worry about getting somebody else's permission to do what I want with my body. But at the same point in time, the doctors it almost seemed like they agree with me. They were just kind of checking the block. They had two sessions, like the PhD had two sessions with me, and then I was seeing the other therapist before for a little while, anyways. And so she just was like, okay, well, I'll sign off on it. It was like we didn't really. It wasn't that thorough of
yeah,
a thing, but again, I knew it. I knew who I was as
yeah,
well, so that's easy to determine. But yeah, I've heard the same thing is happening like with the mastectomies and stuff like that. It's just not really like the safeguarding. They're not really diving too deep into what the issues actually are. They're just like, okay, sign off on that, sign off on this, and that's why I'm working to pass bills across the country, especially here. There's one here in Georgia that I was there to testify to stop, the medicalization of kids in this way. Like,
Oh,
we're hopefully going to get it passed. It just went to the House, so we're hopefully going to get that passed. And um, but it, that was one of the issues I actually had even with the bill that we have here is that it specifies that it bans for gender dysphoria. And I made the case to the senator that I was working with, or the senator that was in charge of the Health and Human Services Department. I said, I wish this bill went further. I wish that it shouldn't just cover people for gender dysphoria. It should cover, the the young female who has body issues and wants breast implants for her 16th birthday. That should also be banned. Like,
yeah.
no life altering elective surgeries until you're 18. Like, that should be standard across the board, no brainer, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, your body's not done growing, and it's just like, most tattoo places won't give you a tattoo, and I don't think that they should until you're at, 18 years old. Um,
Hmm.
it's just way too much pressure on that person performing it and the child, because they're just like, they don't know what they want. Even
Yeah.
me getting breast implants and tattoos and stuff, like, would I repick what I picked when I was 18? Maybe not. When I was 22,
Yeah.
if I could go back and do it as styles change and things change, like, maybe I wouldn't have done it. So
Well,
I think that
yeah.
protect children by doing
Well,
what you're saying.
and that's interesting because I mean, a lot of people use the tattoo argument to say we don't let kids get tattoos, and
Yeah.
in the state of Georgia, that's actually correct. So we don't let children, anybody under the age of 18, get a tattoo, even with parental consent. But a lot of states in the country, your parents can sign off on you getting a tattoo.
Yeah.
I actually got a tattoo at the age of 15, and guess what? I had it removed.
Oh, good. Yeah.
But it was okay. It was on my. I mean, the one I got on my 18th birthday is I still have, but the other one I had at 15, it's on my calf. It was not flattering. It
Yeah.
was not flattering in a dress. I'm like, I don't want this anymore. It's not a feminine tattoo. I'm gonna get it removed. So that's what I've gotten it like removed.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, I have a tattoo that I might remove. It's somebody's name. We won't talk about that too much, but it's like I got that at 30. But, it's like whatever. I was 30. I made that choice. I'll either live with it or I'll get it removed. But I wouldn't have wanted to make that choice when I was, 17 or 16.
Yeah.
But luckily for those, you do have the option to remove it. And even though,
That's the other thing, yeah. That's what actually was in my speech when I was gonna testify, as I said, we don't even let kids in the state of Georgia, we don't even let kids get a tattoo even with parental consent.
yeah,
And the thing is, tattoos are removable
yeah.
through a long and expensive process and painful process, but they are removable because they hurt so much to get it removed.
Yeah, that's what I've heard, is that it's way more painful than getting a tattoo. It's like way more
It's
painful.
like 15 minutes of like the most excruciating pain that I could think of. Honestly, one of the most painful things I've ever felt.
Yeah.
Um, and I have a tattoo on my rib, so
Oh, I'll probably just keep mine now that you said that. I'll just live with
oh
it.
no. Just get
Maybe
it like covered up or get it crossed out or
yeah, yeah, some type of henna thing over it. Um, okay, so tell us a little bit about, like, your story, because you said you didn't transition till you were 30 years old. What kind of led up to that, if you don't mind kind of sharing, like, back when you were a child, were you feeling this, or was it something that you couldn't put your finger on? Like, how did that kind of go for you?
Yeah, so my story is interesting because I do know that like my first experience, just like almost every other transsexual who's actually happy with a transition, um, remembers like at the time that you become like self-aware. So around like the age of 4, I knew something was different about me. Something was off. And I remember trying to dress on at 4 years old. So I knew I was attracted to that type of stuff. And I always remember that it wasn't that I thought I was a girl. I always wished I was, though.
Mm,
Um, it was interesting going through puberty. Puberty was a really interesting time because and confusing time because I'm also bisexual, and so I was like, I'm interested in women, but I'm also envious. Like that
yeah.
was kind of something that I always felt. Um, and then the only time I thought about myself with a man was as a woman, so it was very confusing time. I went to college. I kind of tried to block it all out and just kind of hide this secret. I thought it might be just like a cross-dressing fetish or something. I don't know what was going on, but I had always wondered what it would be like to be a woman, at least for like a day or something like that. What that like that's what I always longed for.
Yeah.
Um, and I guess that's the difference between um, and it really took me exploring who I was to figure it all out. So it was interesting because I graduated college in 2009. There were zero jobs because it was a recession.
Oh, we're the same age then. That was,
Yeah,
I think I graduated in like right around there. Oh, wait, how old are you? I'm 36. I graduated kind of off time
I'm
because
35.
first.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, so we're about the same age. So yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. That was like pretty much when I finished too.
Yeah, and so, I ended up joining the Army as a logistics officer,
Oh,
um, and then like, my first year in the Army, I met my now ex-wife. um, we got married not long after, like, couple maybe a year and a half after we had met, and then she was the first person I came out to in 2014. Um, we tried to make things work. I was, yeah, we were trying to make things work in the relationship. After that, it was kind of a big bombshell.
yeah,
I think she knew that I probably would have gone on to transition far before I knew, because I was happy to stay content in that relationship, even if I meant I was miserable, I guess. But we separated in 2015. At the end of 2015, I moved to Fort Bragg, North Carolina, where I kind of started to explore who I was and go out. I would go to gay bars and all this stuff, and I realized I started feeling more comfortable just being out. Like that felt more right to me. In 2017, I got out of the army, moved to Atlanta, and basically the moment I moved to Atlanta, I was like living on the weekends uh, as a woman, and and then just working during the week as a man until I guess July of 2019 or 2018 is when I kind of came out to my family, and I have a very supportive family. They all, but and so then I started taking hormones in March of 2019. Um, yeah, so around the age of 30, I started taking hormones, and it's been the right decision since. It's just something where I feel a lot more comfortable this way. Um, and I couldn't never even imagine going and living back the other way. Like it just would never happen. If like if I ever thought about detransitioning, I'd cry. Like it's just not something I would ever feel comfortable doing.
yeah. I was just gonna ask you because I was just thinking about. I know you do a lot of work with. You work with uh Trans Against Groomers. Is that right? That's the name of the organization that
Well,
you run.
yeah, I was the communications director for Trans Against Groomers, but Trans Against Groomers is no longer a thing. We all absorbed back up under Gays Against Groomers,
Oh,
so it's just one big organization.
one big organization. Yeah. So
Yeah.
you're doing super important work now. You're living as the person that you felt that you wanted to be. Like, can you imagine your life like had you never taken that step, had you never come out, had you just like oppressed it, like the difference between like your quality of life with that situation if you had gone that route versus now, like do you think about that ever really, like had you
Um,
step into being who you are?
well, it's hard to think about, that type of stuff. I don't really look at that too much. It is I mean, I never actually really think about like what if I didn't transition. Sometimes I think about like what if I didn't start like doing this advocacy work that I'm doing, just because sometimes it does get to be a lot, gets to be a lot of hate, gets to be a lot of um, you know, um from you just get a lot, and now that I'm starting to get more attention, it's just becoming even more. And so, and then if you Google my name, it's impossible for me to find a job because you Google my name and I'm problematic. And so I think about it like that, but I don't ever think about, yeah, going back, and what would have happened if I would have just trudged along. I really don't. And actually, it's kind of a way that I've always lived my life as well, because people would say, would you if you could go back, would you transition like in your teens? Like if I was a kid and I don't live my life like that. I don't live my life with regrets. So it's really hard for me to think about because I'm happy with where my life's at now. It's really hard for me to think about what would have changed. I don't like thinking about like the butterfly effect and all that stuff. And actually, the tattoo on my rib cage actually says, "Only look back to see how far you've come. Focus on what's ahead." So it is kind of a life philosophy for me to not really dredge too much, just learn from the past.
Plan for the past. That's awesome. Yeah, I only ask because like, I get a lot of online hate too, as you know, because of the yoga pants, because of all kind of things. But there was a
Which
time.
I wear yoga pants all the time too. Like that's mostly what I wear 99% of the
Yeah,
time.
everyone wants to wear yoga pants. Anyone who puts on a pair of yoga pants never wants to put on a different pair of pants. In my opinion, you're like,
No,
okay,
you're
way more
right.
comfortable. But yeah, so I get a lot of hate online too, so I understand how you feel. But for me, a lot of it is like, because I wear yoga pants now and I work in the gym and I'm a fitness coach and I post pictures in those clothes. People want to blame me for that's why your marriage didn't work out. Look how you've ruined your family and everything. They don't really know the backstory, but it's just interesting because I personally think about had that marriage not ended, like, and I wouldn't have been the person I am now, how much harder that would have been for me. Like, I'm like, oh, I'm so people can't understand. I don't usually get into it too much, but I'm just like, this is how stuff was supposed to be. So that's the only reason I asked that question because
Yeah,
things,
I agree with that. I think that's kind of where I'm at. It's like this, everything has led up to this
yeah,
point, so I wouldn't really ever change anything because again, like I said, I, I'm at a place where I'm enjoying my life right now. So
yeah,
I people ask me how I can be Catholic and be trans, and I'm like, because I've seen the work. You know, I've literally at the lowest. You always see like the lowest points of your life end up becoming crossroads, and always lead to something bigger. And at that crossroads, something had changed. You don't know where you would be going. It's interesting. So that's what I'm like I always know, like when I lost my job in 2019, and I was like, that was like the next day. I was like, I went and changed my name. I did everything like that. Like that was like God
like the
pushing
moment.
me.
Yeah. Yeah, that's crazy. I know, and sometimes that's what it takes. And I totally understand what you're saying with like when you are that like much in speaking out and speaking your truth, how hard it is because I totally agree. I know right away because I Googled my own name last night, I think. And I was like, oh my, like it hard for me to get a corporate job at this point with all the stuff that I have on the internet. And none of it's people accuse me of OnlyFans and stuff. Not that no shade to the OnlyFans girls. I say you do you. But I'm saying like none of it is that, but it's just conspiracy theories and yoga pants and all kind of stuff. So I understand what you're saying.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
I gotta forge my own way now because all of it is out there. So um but yeah, so I wanted to ask you your thoughts about because I had done a little video about the chocolate and this kind of we're like transitioning into the online hate thing here because
Yeah.
this thing that's been bothering me a lot is that realizing how much hate comes from mostly the conservatives, some very conservative libertarians too. But there's been so much hate towards like transgendered women specifically, not the men. Maybe the
Hmm.
many. I'm not sure statistically, but so much hate. Like how 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 has that affected you? Like with this whole Women's Day thing and everything. Like how do you kind of like get through all that and just put on a smile and everything?
Well, when everything that happens, like the Women's Day stuff, it
Yeah.
actually, where look at a lot of that stuff, I'm like, I it's the trans rights activists, the TRAs that really kind of push it in this direction so that
Mm,
we get all this hate because like the Women's Day stuff. No, it's like trans women are trans women. We're not women. So, you we have like every other day of the year, women can have one day that does not include trans women, males. So I mean, I did a reel for Outspoken that talked about the whole Hershey chocolate bar, and I'm like, "Hey, you guys can have this day." And so when I see that type of stuff, I just realize like that type of stuff is going to cause uproar and backlash against even people like me who are even speaking out against, a lot of the craziness that's happening from my community, or from the people that, call themselves trans. Like
Yeah.
it's, because I hate to say my community because it's not really a community because they kicked me out of the community. I'm no longer allowed. So,
I-
but at the same time, it does. It's like the really strong hard right conservatives. Like we are in this very this middle ground. If you watch Blair White's video when she was reacting to the one Morgan, whatever her name was,
oh, I watched it.
she mentioned it. She was like, we like there's a few of us that are in the middle. Like we don't, the left hate us, obviously. And then a lot of people on the right are not our friends. They don't really like us either. And they are going to push super hard the other way. And so we have to live in this area of nuance and just keep moving forward because the message is still getting out there. Like people are hearing it. It's just not the big vocal voices that are hearing it as much.
Yeah. And I think I understand where you're coming from because, like you said, if that's your community, even if they've kicked you out of their community, you're like, I have to represent and show like the better side. So I feel like that on behalf of biological women, I'm like, you guys are being mean girls. You need to stop. Like, you don't need to have your claws out. I do not. So maybe I'm not like a regular woman or something, but I don't like at night lie awake and think like, Sarah said she's a woman too, and it's Women's Day, and how dare she? Like, I would never
Yeah.
lose two thoughts on something like that. It's like it does not matter to me. And same thing, but there's a lot of jealousy among women, so I have to remember that. I'm like, some women are very jealous. They might be jealous if they think another woman's prettier than them. So they might be jealous if they think, a man makes a better, transition to a woman than they do. Like they feel threatened. But at the same time, I'm like, you have to grow up at a certain point. You can't just go claws out at everyone all the time.
Hmm.
That's kind of like where I stand on that.
Well, you're also not a feminist, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's a lot of it comes from either the feminist space and then the very socially conservative, like the trad space.
Yeah.
Like those are the two spaces that are really against us.
Yeah.
And the radical feminist spaces, they are harsh. And it's really interesting because this is what in this you kind of alluded to this a little bit before because think about this. They so many people and maybe and it's like this the patriarchal society that we live in, right? It's like trans women are demonized even though the biggest spikes recently have been the trans men. It's been mostly young females that have been transitioning.
Right.
And so mostly what you see are females. But it's trans men or trans women who are demonized because we're males or they will call us men.
Yeah.
And so the feminists hate us because we're still male. But it's interesting because they see us as fetishist and people who are predators and all these different things, but then they see the trans men as these delicate flowers who were tricked into transitioning because they're females.
Okay, because they're females transitioning. You know what's so funny? And I think this is why I have a unique perspective because I have brothers and I've always understood men better. Like I always say like I'm not like a sister woman. So like I never understand the ways of women like entirely because they can be very catty and stuff. So I was joking about this. I was like, I guess the only because I like Blair White, for instance. I looked at all her videos. I was like having like a brain melt. I'm like, she is a woman. I'm like, I do not see it. I can't see anything that looks like she was a man to me. And then I realized something, and I'm realizing it right now as we talk. And I hope you don't take offense to this, but I was like, okay, the only way I know Blair White used to be a man is because I enjoy her content so much. And I never like watching women, awful and mean as that sounds. And same thing like talking to you, the back and forth and stuff. I usually, not to be mean, ladies, I'm sorry. I hope y'all watch this and hate me or anything, but I usually don't enjoy my conversations with women as much as men. So like I don't know if that's just like a me thing or something like that, that kind of like more relaxed energy or something that, people have. But I do think, that it's interesting. Like I like some female commentators like Candace Owens and stuff, but when they get, I guess maybe it's that trad, you said like traditional woman thing that they get into, it's like the cattiness is so much. But I didn't know that they had that from the feminists too, because I actually never watched them. So that was kind of an interesting
Yeah.
revelation.
Yeah, because that's really where that's where most of the fight. It's really interesting watching because you have the third wave feminists who do not fall in line with like the Democratic Party anymore because it's the fourth wave of feminism has included trans women. And so like that's what's kind of the fourth wave is kind of pushing like the trans women and women's sports and what is it, all the other things that you're seeing, like the changing of language and everything like that. That is the fourth wave of feminism. And there's a lot of third wave feminists that they're like, wait, we fought for all these rights. We don't want males to take this. So that fight is kind of on the left. Quite a bit of the fight is happening on the left side of the aisle. And it's interesting watching like alt right like MAGA people or alt right like QAnon supporters partnering with like radical feminists like
Oh,
on some of these trans issues.
yeah, yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah, I was
But
gonna say I didn't mean to say MAGA because MAGA is a completely different thing, and I'm not saying that they're all right. So
yeah, yeah. No, but that's interesting you say that because there are a lot of conservatives like, like those traditional ones, Candace Owens, stuff like that. They're the kind of the angry, like, they're stealing womanhood from us. But then I've noticed that it's like maybe not Candace Owens specifically, but kind of like as that group blends into like some other group or whatever, they start to come out with like women shouldn't vote, women should like very
I know
Christian.
who you're talking about. Yeah.
Yes, yeah. She's not the only one, and there are libertarians who talk about this too. Some of the more conservative libertarians I've seen, like some of those Tower Gang, Top Lobster, and stuff, talk about, and I don't know, some of it might be snarkiness, but it's like repeal the 19th Amendment. I hear other people saying like basically like women shouldn't be, like preachers, stuff like that, like leading, all kind of different.
Yeah.
So I'm like, it seems so confusing where they want women to stand and why we can't just accept that this is modern society. Like we're not going to lose our rights to vote. We're not going to go backwards in time.
Yeah, you're not going to change that. But it is interesting because I just wrote a an op-ed and I'm working with Colin right now. I don't know if you know, right now I'm working as this assistant editors for Reality's Last Stand Substack, which
Oh,
is Colin Wright, and but now Christina is going to be taking my position, I think. So,
oh, is that?
um,
I wanted to talk about her from the Daily Wire.
yes.
Oh,
So, but I think he might be publishing it, and it's talking about the slippery slope, and I think the slippery slope is kind of a fallacy in a lot of ways, right? Because it plays off the assumption that something bad wouldn't have started happening had something else happened. And that also goes back to how far back you want to go. Like I'm looking at, I laid out the path from women getting the right to vote per se to queer theory being taught in schools because women getting the right to vote, they were allowed to go in the workplace. Then it became gender studies courses in colleges, and then queer theory was developed in gender study courses in the early '90s, pushed through feminism up until now, where the fourth wave feminism is taking over, and so that's why we're seeing it. But I'm like, it doesn't mean just because something that you don't want to happen is happening doesn't mean that you don't stop something good from happening that you think should have happened, like women getting the right to vote, women going into the workforce, women doing, getting all of your rights and everything like that. Like that's so it's a fallacy in so many ways because you also have to assume like that it wouldn't have happened even if you had stopped it. Like, do you think that it would be any different. Like a lot of people say that the slippery slope happened when gay marriage was legalized. That's why you're seeing the sexualization of kids now. And you have to assume that had gay marriage not been legalized, we wouldn't be seeing what we're seeing right now. And I think that's kind of a fallacy. I think that there was always this push. I mean, the term transsexual was changed to transgender in like 2012. So there was already this push to make that happen before gay marriage was ever even about 5 years before gay marriage was legalized. So the slippery slope's an interesting concept, but I think it's a real concept, but I think it's a fallacy in a lot of ways because it relies on assumptions.
Yeah, and I agree with you. And something that I always like to think about is like why we have so much anxiety in America. And part of that comes from the fact that we think that everything we do is linked to everything else. Like when instead you just need to stay in your lane. Here's what I did. I'm not responsible for how someone else takes that and reacts and where they go with it. And if people can see that and separate, like, yes, just because two gay people want to get married, that doesn't mean that they're responsible for what someone else goes down the line and does. Like, and if we start to think like that, we'll drive ourselves crazy. And that's probably why
Hmm.
we're so anxious, because if I do this, someone else might do that. Well, you can't think like that. The
Yeah.
other that people don't realize, the slippery slope goes in the other direction. So my father, he's actually grew up in the Middle East, and he is Christian, but he grew up in a predominantly Islamic country. But there were other countries around, Saudi Arabia, stuff like that, where he would not go because they had such different rules. Things like, if you're caught stealing, they're going to cut off your arm, or any types of things. Like there are a lot of places there where women are getting stoned for all kind of different stuff. Maybe not as much now, like hopefully it's better, but there are slippery slopes in the other direction too. And one thing that I saw,
Yeah.
that Bella Moody, who I can't stand because she's so cringy, although I'm sure her heart, she thinks it's in the right place. I just don't like how she comes off. I don't like how she treats or talks to other people, or about them. But I saw her basically celebrating a post about, like, look, these women in some country in the Middle East are getting arrested for dancing. And I'm like, but also all sorts of awful things happen to women, sometimes, like if their hair shows or they get accidentally, they're with a man, and everything. And it looks suspicious. Like those are slippery slopes in the other direction. So we don't need to like
Hmm.
celebrate that either. Like we don't, things are not so bad here, but I feel like there is some tweaking that needs to happen. And I agree with the type of work you're doing to try to protect the people that need to be protected. But as far as like adults and
Yeah.
we're, doing okay.
Yeah, absolutely. I
Yeah.
agree.
Yeah. So real quick, I know we probably like been on here for almost an hour, but what do you think about the libertarian movement? Have you always been a libertarian? Kind of like what is your place and kind of journey there, if you want to tell us really quick?
So yeah, I mean, it's been interesting. So I actually spoke at the Rage Against the War Machine. I spoke in front of the White House, and I did that. And as a veteran, which is really it's great. But so what my journey kind of has been, so 9/11 kind of made me a neocon. I saw in what I call now, I call it like blind patriotism that happened because everybody was like, America, we should have gone into Afghanistan and all this stuff. That's the thought. And then I really was a constitutional conservative. I was part of the Tea Party movement, and really fell in love with Ron Paul's message.
Yeah.
And I was like, the only thing I couldn't didn't really feel comfortable voting because I was still in this belief that the U.S. had to have this strong force and presence around the world in order to keep us safe, right? And so that was the one thing. Like, he planted the seeds of liberty, but it wasn't there yet. And it took about 5 years of being in the army. I was in school, and they were teaching us in our captain's career course to see big picture strategy, like invasion strategy and stuff like that, and how to plan for it. And when I looked at a map and I saw, and it had dawned on me that you have Afghanistan over here, you have Iraq right here, you have Iran in the middle. So we didn't go into Iraq for WMDs or oil. We went into Iraq to have a double flank position, which is a strategic position to keep Iran in check. And that opened my eyes to then when ISIS kind of blew up in the region because we had destabilized Iraq so much and radicalized so many people against us. You start looking through history and see that we've been doing the same type of stuff. It's been this perpetual cycle since the Johnson administration, and that maybe, just maybe, Ron Paul was right. And that was kind of my Ron Paul was right moment, even on foreign policy. And so now I'm very anti-interventionalist. I think we need to bring all of our troops home.
Yeah.
And I became a minarchist, and that's kind of where I'm at now, is that I believe that the only thing that our government should be doing is providing a standing army to prevent invasion. We shouldn't be,
Yeah.
anywhere else around the world preventing, wars and stuff like that. Like, it's not our business. We need to be protecting our borders, and that's the only reason why we have a government. That's the only reason why we have a military. And a lot of it's for, the military industrial complex and people making money because off of this perpetual cycles of war. And so that's kind of where I've landed now in the movement. And I didn't get involved in the party until a year and a half ago, maybe. And I'm still not like in the party. I'm kind of one foot in, one foot out. I think for the most part, the party they don't do it enough to spread liberty around the world. And the only times that they really, as a movement, so the party really can do stuff like doing the Rage Against the War Machine event was a great thing for them to do. I think that was awesome. That's what they should be doing, and stuff like that, like more activism, stuff like that. Otherwise, nobody hears about them. And then during election season, you run local candidates on the ballot to spread the message, but really what you're trying to do is cause runoffs like we had here in Georgia, and you cause a runoff, and then you get a lot of airtime as the Libertarian candidate to try to push a message.
Yeah.
And that's the only time you get, as a somebody that's in the Libertarian Party, to really get any airtime to push a message is when you cause a runoff, and you have to use that time wisely. And so, I mean, I think I'm more about single issue advocacy than just, pushing candidates. And so I work with, I was on the board of the Georgia Log Cabin Republicans. I work with conservatives organizations all the time because that's where I can actually get stuff done. I feel like I'm able to I have a lot of now senators who know me in Congress here, and so we can actually pass bills that are good for us. And I think that's where I'm at in this fight. Not as much so involved in the party, and it's not because of the new leadership, not because of the old leadership. I think that there is a lot of just infighting going on in the party that it doesn't even make any sense because they're not getting much done anyways on either side. So, and they haven't. So, I kind of stay away from the libertarian drama for the most part because it's not conducive and it's not helpful and it does nothing to advance my mission.
Yeah. No, I feel you there. And I understand exactly what you're talking about. And that was kind of like my frustration with the party, is that it would be nice to see like a better united front where we were pushing, the message to more and more people, getting more registered voters, everything. It might just not be that time, but like you said, we push liberty at an individual level, at a state level, working with.
Well, we could be lobbying.
Citizen lobbying. Mm-hmm.
Why? The party itself would get more done if they became like a lobbyist organization rather than a political party, honestly.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's something that we can all do individually. That's something that I've done last year, not like to a huge extent, like it sounds like you have. This year, now that I'm going to start to work from home and everything, I should have a lot more time to go down. I went to the Capitol a few times last year, but now I plan to go, often, for especially for me, health freedom bills, because that's kind of my big
Hmm.
thing. Now, who knows, that and education, as things kind of shift away from the health freedom a little bit, because it's not like the hot topic. We don't have them writing tons of bills on it. I'm going to kind of try to get involved more with the education bills. But
Yeah, that's kind of what we're doing here. So we had, so my bills, obviously the trans bills that are going on here,
yeah.
but then I've been working a little bit with no left turn education. So we got, I think we got a voucher bill through, so school
Oh,
choice bill through the Senate last week. AFP was working on that. We were kind of did an AFP day,
yeah.
as well as was it certificate of need,
Mhm.
or yeah, no certificate of yeah certificate of need laws need to be eliminated as well in terms of healthcare. So that's kind of those are some of the stuff that I've seen and worked on a little bit as well, but not really. I mean, we were just lobbying the one day at the Capitol for that stuff with AFP.
Yeah, that's awesome. So I guess, yeah, we're getting close to an hour here. So before we wrap up, I just want to kind of see, like, is there anything else like you will want to share with people, about yourself, about your journey, about transgenderism or libertarianism, really anything, like what, if you could tell everyone the message on.
I think, especially when it comes to liberty politics, I think we get too wrapped up into like kind of going back to what we were talking about, like government is evil and we can't work within we get too wrapped up in philosophy,
Yeah.
right? Like, and we let perfect be the enemy of good. And even I see conservatives I work with, like on bills, they're like, this isn't like exactly what we want. I'm like, it's still a good bill. It's don't let perfect be the enemy of good. Because it's like incremental change. You have to get in the mindset of incrementally changing the system
Yeah.
to get it to where you want to be. And many of us will never see in our lifetimes the system that we want, but you have to push small little changes to get there. Um, so again, like you want to get rid of the Department of Education, right?
Yeah.
You want to get rid of public schools in general. School choice is the first step to get there. Same thing as, and some people will argue on that point too, that school choice is not what it's made out to be because government, once government's funding is going to private schools, then they have control over private schools. So that there might be some validity to that. So I'm not going to talk too much, but
No, I feel you.
other stuff that I mean, but it's like, well, what's another good area? Um, I think that the point though I'm trying to make is yeah, incremental change is how you have to go about this. This is how the left has created such a large government,
Yeah.
is through very small changes throughout the years to get there. And if you can get people on your side to go along with what you want and maybe get some bipartisan support on some of this stuff, then I think we can get to a good system, but it's not going to happen overnight. And if you're just going, oh, gay marriage, I was going to say gay marriage. Government doesn't belong in marriage in the first place.
Yeah.
But as long as they tie stuff like tax breaks, immigration status, all this other stuff to marriage, then it should be equal for everybody type stuff. Like,
Yeah.
right? Yes, I believe the philosophy, but I'm not going to throw out, you know, allowing gay people to get married just because the whole system should be abolished. Like, being too hardline principled
Yeah.
does not get you anywhere. It just gets you into fights online.
No, I totally agree. And I just wonder sometimes if that's a maturity issue and maybe something that you understand because of all the things that you've been through, that you're like, just because something's not going to be like quote unquote perfect. Like I had to learn that basically with my son, with everything he's gone through. He's, I'm not allowed to say he's autistic because he didn't get fully diagnosed, but everything he's been through as a small child, like till now, realizing that, like, okay, it's not always going to be perfect. He's not going to maybe hit every single milestone at that time or anything, but we can work with him. This is what he can do. This is what we're going to focus on. And that changed me as a person so much that I understand the
Mhm.
concept you're talking about. But I see a lot of libertarians doing exactly what you're saying, where they're just like, no, it has to be like this. And I'm like, to me, that's a very immature way of looking at the world.
Yeah.
Like, you have to try to work with what you have, whatever it is. So,
Well, and again, I mean, and it's building single issue coalitions are key to doing this. And this is again with the libertarian movement, it's like you have the party now, and you have the people that were in power that are just being contrarian to be contrarian to whatever is going on. I think I'm seeing a lot of that, and I think the Rage Against the War Machine um, rally was an example. It was like, why are you working with communists to do this? Well, they're against war. You know, I have no issues working with communists if it's on a war issue. And Spike Cohen was one of the people that taught me about single issue advocacy when he worked with Black Lives Matters to get criminal justice reform done. It's like we can work with people and agree to disagree on some stuff. When I was speaking at that rally, and this is kind of off topic, it's on the same topic, but it's so funny because I'm like, when I was speaking at that rally, and I realized that
yeah.
any other day of the week, half of these people would be protesting against me for what my stance on, the
Yeah.
gender ideology stuff is, but they're cheering for me today.
Yeah.
I mean, it was kind of surreal to think about
Yeah.
that.
That's powerful. That totally makes sense. Like when something can bring you together. Somebody said I should have Austin Peterson on my channel. Just so you know, I've actually had Austin Peterson on my Instagram, and there's a video up on there. I was on Austin Peterson's show last week. And I'm pretty sure Austin Peterson is how I found you, Sarah. Which
Yeah, I was gonna say we're both ambassadors for AP for Liberty Shop, right?
no, but I did buy some leggings. I did.
Oh,
Austin Peterson and I, we actually had kind of uh, a rough start, but olive branches have been extended all over the place, and we're good now. So when I first had him on my Instagram, we had like a surprise debate that I didn't know we were having, and I was like, "Oh my god!" We know the V products. I don't know if we can talk about them on YouTube, but um, yeah, so it got a little bit heated, but now I like Austin a lot. I like his shop. I like his show, and I think that he's pretty cool. So yeah, should have him on again sometime. I did want to
yeah, I
ask.
love him.
Yeah, yeah, he's cool, and his wife seems really cool too. I saw her on his show, and she seems very funny.
Steffi was one of my first friends on Twitter. I remember when
Oh,
she moved to Missouri because she was originally from Michigan. I was going up to visit my family in Michigan, and I was like, "Hey, I'm gonna be up in Michigan. Do you want to meet sometime?" And she was like, "I'm literally moving to Missouri right now," and I'm like,
yeah,
but me and Austin have been friends for yeah a few years, and he's been on my show a couple times, and working with the shop and doing stuff with him, and I've been on his show all the way back to when he was on KWS radio morning show. I've been on both of his shows in Missouri, so
oh,
like
nice.
recently, yeah. So he's
Yeah,
a great guy.
yeah, they seem really like a really good couple too. So before we wrap up, I did want to ask you one more thing about the libertarian stuff. One thing that I try to talk to the Libertarian Party about is that if we go to conservative, and because there are some very conservative people, and they try to go a little bit socially conservative too. So it's like, like traditional values of like against gay marriage, things like that, against, sex work or OnlyFans type women that do things like that. I try to tell them, if you really try to take only like the red vote, like you're actually going to lose everything. And since our party stands on the platform of, if you're an adult, do whatever you want, these things should, we can garner blue, side voters. And I think that I had to have like a come to Jesus, I guess, moment with myself, where I realized like I'm very conservative. People wouldn't always say that about me, but I am pretty conservative. But I realized like that's not really the best thing. Like it's not all about me. And then I started to
Hmm.
realize, like, there are other people out there who are great people. They're left leaning. They would be a blue voter, if we couldn't bring them to be a libertarian. How do you think that that's kind of going? And do you have any thoughts there? Have you noticed kind of a shift or anything?
I mean, yeah, there is a little bit of a shift. There's different sections of the party and of the movement that obviously they seem to. It's interesting because you're right. Some people want to spread different values in the movement, and it's like that's not what this movement is about. This movement gets people from all sides because um we are, you know, you can have your personal values, but as long as you're not hurting anybody else, then it should be nobody else's business. Like that's always been like, I don't, it's people will say, you know, I don't smoke weed, but it's not my business if you do because it's not harming me. I don't agree with being trans or being gay, but it's not harming me. So what am I, what, it should be no issue. Like, you know, I can accept it, whatever. And so I think, yeah, taking hardline stances against stuff like that does hurt the movement because you miss a lot of people that would normally be coming over to our side from the left. And I mean, it's funny because I mean, I get along with like, I get along with a lot of the Macy's people. I get along with just about everybody in the party, other than a few sections of the party, but it's multiple sections in different areas of the party too, because it's just multiple individuals. Like me and Angela McCurdle have a good relationship, and I appreciate what she's done. And so, like I said, I think that there's some people that just want to be contrarian to the movement, and then yeah, there are some people who are legitimately harming the cause because they do want to be more authoritarian, or maybe it's not even that they just want to be authoritarian. They just like they may disagree with, you know, they may be homophobic and they express that, and they may not be expressing to have government do anything about it, but they may just be expressing those views. And I think that people take that into them saying that they would use the government to eradicate transgenderism, you know.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And I think that like then you're alienating people from the party. So that's kind of
Yeah,
my issue there. But yeah, we're about an hour. So thank you so much for coming on. This was really fun. I really like this conversation. I am gonna save this to my YouTube channel and I'll share you a link too. So
sounds good.
get it out there. But everyone, thank you so much for watching. If you liked this video, please go ahead and leave a nice comment. If you didn't like this video and it's about me, you can leave a nasty comment. We're equal opportunity comment readers here. If that's not good enough, you can go troll me on Twitter. It's THT Liberty Chick. And if you're still not satisfied, send me a mean DM that Liberty Chick on Instagram. So
That's the way to go.
yeah, exactly.
Love the haters because they
Yeah.
quite literally put money in your pocket, and that's the way I look at it.
Exactly. So I'm like, hit me on all platforms. Tell me how much you like. Okay.
It boosts you in the algorithm. That's all that matters.
Yeah. Love them. I don't think they won. But yeah, this was really fun. Thank you all so much, everybody who watched. Y'all have a good night. And thank you, Sarah.
Okay. Thank you.